When running a business, don't underestimate the human resource aspect of your business. People management, performance, and governance. Join me in the Absa Women in Business Masterclass series, where I'll share key HR fundamentals with you that will be critical for your business.
So good afternoon once again, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We have yet another interesting session. Today we're looking at all things HR related. And I'll be your host during this masterclass, your moderator rather. My name is Vanji Lufungulo, and maybe just before we start and I do the introduction of our speaker this afternoon, we'll just go through some housekeeping rules really quickly. So the first one, obviously, please, we request that you keep your mic off. Just turn off your mic and also your camera, just so that we have the right quality in terms of imagery. And then also we will have a Q&A session. So as we're getting to the Q&A session, you can raise your hand or you can post in the chat. So as you raise your hand, if you'd like to turn on your camera at that point, you can be able to pose the question to Chimango, who's our host this afternoon, and she will be able to take the question. So on that note, I'd just like to first start by introducing our speaker this afternoon. And a lot of us may be asking, who is Chimango? So Chimango Chikwanda is an HR professional with over 2 decades of strategic and operational experience in mining, FMCG, manufacturing, telecoms, and the financial sectors. She's an award-winning HR practitioner, having won the 2022 and 2023 Award of Excellence in Leadership by the Zambia Institute of Human Resource Management. She was also recently awarded the Leadership for Senior Executives certification by Harvard Business School. She's been involved in major transformations in the banking, telecom, and FMCG sectors. Like I earlier indicated, that is really where she has made her move. She's also been at the helm of Absa, being top employer for 4 years running, and also being considered the best corporate organization in Zambia by the Zambia Institute of Human Resource Management. So I think today we're really grateful to have Chimango here with us. She has keen interests and specializations in organization and culture transformation, leadership and team development, strategic resourcing, and creating high performance cultures. And I think that's really what we're all looking for. When we think of business, how do we just make sure that we are creating that high performance culture? Chimango holds an MS, a Master's in Economics degree from the University of Warwick in the UK, a Bachelor of Economics from the University of London, a Master's degree, again, in Consulting and Coaching for Change from Paris in partnership with Oxford University. So I think you can see from her credentials that really we are grateful to have somebody within the HR space who's really made great leaps and strides. And during her leadership and human capital journey, Chimango has identified diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI as we call it, as a key strategic advantage in organizations, and has worked to embed DEI through diversity programs focused on generational and gender diversity. So Chimango, thank you so much for coming through today. We do know you're busy, but I think it's also so important for us to take time, particularly for businesses, and see where does HR really fit in. And I think maybe firstly just to say welcome, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Thank you so much, Vanji. Thanks for this opportunity for me to speak to our customers. As Chief People Officer for Absa Zambia, most of my engagements are with my internal customer, the colleagues. So it really is a rare opportunity for me to interface with our customers, external customers at large, especially women in business. As you've said, women in business is a key area of interest for me. And Absa Zambia is a diversity and equity inclusion employer. We walk the talk, and I can proudly say that over 40% of our leaders are female.
So I'm really excited to be here, and thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Chimango. So as you've heard, 40% of leadership positions are being held by women within Absa. So when we talk about women in business or just the women inclusion agenda, it's really something that we hold dear to our hearts. It's strategic for us. So as Chimango has said, we are really walking the talk, and hence us having this session this afternoon. So maybe Chimango, as we are starting, my first question, and maybe as you're getting into the presentation, would be, for most enterprises, I think we often find that the buck ends with the person behind the business. So you'll find that the woman is the debt collector, she's the business developer, she's the accounts manager, she's the marketing executive, and more importantly, she is the HR manager as well. And because of this, it's often thought that the embedment of HR practices mainly relates to large corporates, if I can call them that. So it's not really something that you have to concern yourself if you're an SME. Even if I have 1 or 2 employees, I shouldn't really be bothered with, human resource management. So how can you help us this afternoon just to see how we can incorporate small and medium enterprises to really start paying attention to HR management?
First of all, I'd really like to commend all those brave women who have gone out and started a business. Running a business is not for the faint-hearted, especially as you've said, the buck stops with you, and you're, often, multi-hatting, not even double-hatting, you're multi-hatting. So it's really difficult. One of our values is courage. So I think, we recognize it for your courage. And another one of our values is resourcefulness. It's something that we encourage our colleagues as well, not just customers, but we really admire you for those values that you are living every single day as you are nurturing and growing your precious business. But the question that you've raised, Vanji, is really important. It's a very important question. And the short answer to it is yes. Small and medium enterprises or SMEs need to pay the same level of attention to HR management as large corporates for the exact same reasons that we do in the large corporates. Firstly, it's to enable the strategy and to ensure that the organization is able to deliver its goals against its goals. So that's the main reason that SMEs need to pay the same level of attention. Also, the second reason is because they're held to the same account as large companies. There are no exemptions for SMEs, especially legally. Those of you who are running businesses and those of you who are in corporate know that the labor market is highly legislated in Zambia. So there are a lot of risks associated with us not following proper HR procedures and practices. So for this very reason, it's important for SMEs to make sure that they're operating in line with labor legislations, because they're not given any special exemptions. It's more important for them than for large corporates because they also don't have the resources that large corporates have to mitigate that risk and address that risk when it does materialize as well.
Okay, so I think when you look at the 4 aspects that you have highlighted, it's very clear to see that SMEs do have a part to play when it comes to HR management, regardless of the size of the business.
Absolutely.
So I think based on that, we can get into today's presentation.
Absolutely. So I will look at the 4 topics. There are many topics in the people management space. I can talk the whole day about it. When Vanji read my resume, it sounds like a lot, and it is. That's basically 30 years of experience. So I have seen quite a lot in this space, and I can talk for days actually on HR. But I'll look at 4 topics, just really as an intro, or HR 101 for SMEs. It's difficult running a small to medium enterprise because, again, it goes back to the issue of resources. You don't have the resources that Absa has. In my department alone, we're 11 of us. We've got centers of excellence looking at specific areas, one area dedicated just to labor legislation, for example. Whereas if you're running a small business, you are probably the HR manager and you've had no HR experience or background. So it is difficult, and we are cognizant of that. And I'll try to keep it simple and try to give you very exact or precise guidelines that will be pragmatic. I won't go into the high level things. So the 4 areas that I'll talk about today, and I hope Banji invites me again another time to talk about other areas, but the 4, I think, immediate ones that I'll talk about today is the first one is HR governance. The second one is around attracting, retaining, and rewarding the right talent to drive your business. The third is culture, something that's really underestimated, but it's really important. And the fourth one is a new topic, and I may not be the right person to go into depth to this. We probably need a Gen Z to come in and support us in this. But it is something that is important, and something that I will touch on as well to guide you around how to make this work for your business. As if to prove this to me, technology is not cooperating. So the first topic that I'll talk to is around HR governance. This sounds like a very fancy term, but in reality, what it really is really just a set of policies, practices, and structures that guide and oversee the management of an organization's human resource. This is something that we take very seriously here at the bank, but I'll talk to you through what it means and what it entails. It's really back to the basics, the fundamentals, what I call the fundamentals of an organization, or the bones of an organization. Without these, your organization can really, come to a hard stop, or I call them showstoppers. I've worked for a number of organizations, and the very first thing that I do when I join an organization is I ask for a series of documents. These documents are here. It's like a checklist. The first is a contract of employment. I need to see what the contract of employment look like, what's contained in there. Then there are also certain documents that are legally required, policies and procedures that are legally required by law. And the first is the HIV and AIDS policy. The second is the health and wellness policy. The third one is the harassment policy, which is a very important one that we are rolling out here at the moment. The fourth is performance management policy. The fifth is discipline and grievance policy. And lastly is the code of conduct. The third set of documents I ask for is a sample of employee files. I always want to see, the employee files. And what I'm checking for there is the legally required documents that should be in the employee file, that they're actually in the file. And these are here: the proof of age, the NRC, the medical certificate, contract of employment, record of wages paid, ZACWA certified academic certificates, which is a new one. The Zambia Qualifications Authority requires that academic certificates are certified by them now. That's a new requirement that is needed. And other documents that should be in the file are job descriptions, marriage certificates, birth certificates for children and dependents. I also ask for conditions of service, the recognition and collective agreements if your organization is unionized, or HR policies and procedures, the organization structure and basic HR reporting showing things like leave, contracts, overtime, headcount, total cost of employment. At the very, very least, as an SME, you should have the legally required documents, and that is the contract of employment, the legally required policies and procedures that I've spoken about, as well as the legally required documents that should be in the sample of the employee files. At the very least, you should have those documents. So I'll talk about the contract of employment because it's so important, and I still get surprised that some organizations, even small organizations, even some of us who have domestic help, that we don't have contract of employment for our employees. It's absolutely critical. It doesn't have to be a fancy or complicated document. It can be a very basic document. However, in that document, you need to have there's certain minimum legal requirements that you need to have in that document. In the old Employment Act, there was something called the verbal agreement. It was a verbal agreement that you could enter into if it was less than 6 months, and you were advised to deduce it to writing. And when you deduced it to writing, you had to have these 10 items in that document. The items that should be there are the full names of the employer and the employee. That's basic. The start date, the employee is required to start work, the job title of that employee and who they're reporting into, the work location, where the address of the location where the employee will be working, remuneration, how much details of the employee's salary, including how frequently you're going to be paid them. Is it a daily wage? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? The work hours that the individual is going to be working. The law provides for 48 hours, as a sort of a maximum. So those are things that you need to put into consideration. Holidays and leave. So information on annual leave, sick leave, and other paid leave entitlements. Notice period as well. What's the notice period for the individual? The contractual benefits, any benefits that employers are legally obligated to provide. The new provision around this, of course, is the housing allowance. Employers are now required to provide a housing allowance or an advance of loans towards housing or housing itself. This is something a lot of employers haven't implemented yet. Lastly, the probation period. So the probation period is 3 months, but it can be extended to 6 months. Again, what a lot of employers forget to do is at 3 months, they forget to extend it for further 3 months if they feel their employee's performance is not to par, and then they try to terminate it without that extension. That can bring problems to you as an employer. So key considerations, other considerations that you need to make is when you do a contract, make sure that you are specific on items like basic salary. The basic salary is a salary you're going to pay. Then if you have other allowance like the housing allowance or any other allowances that you're planning on giving, make sure you define the gross salary. The reason for this, it can have financial implications for you. The financial implications really are NAPSA is calculated on the gross salary, so all allowances are included. However, pay as you earn, NEMA, personal levy are not. So if you just have something called salary, but you still have allowances, you may find that you have to pay using the gross salary for some of these benefits, including things like leave. You should define that leave is calculated on the basic salary, for example. If you have gratuity, you should define that gratuity is paid on the basic salary. Gratuity was a new benefit that was included. It's for contracts exceeding 12 months, though there's still some debate around this, but the understanding appears to be contracts exceeding 12 months attract gratuity of 25%, but this excludes management and expatriate staff, unless, of course, you want to pay them the gratuity. And statutory benefits, I've spoken about housing allowance already as well. So, it sounds like a very basic thing, but it can create a lot of problems for you if you don't have this basic contract of employment, and you make sure that these areas that I've highlighted around basic salary, for example, are properly taken, probation period are probably properly taken care of. It can present a lot of risk for you going forward. Other considerations are, I had a full list of the checklist. I thought it would be important for me to just explain why some of the items are really important, and that SMEs should pay attention to these items. The first is the disciplinary code. In the past, you used to be able to terminate a member of staff giving no reason. You were able to do that, but an SI was passed and that was changed, and now you have to give reason. So in giving reason, you need to make sure that the reason is an acceptable reason. One such acceptable reason is disciplinary, through the disciplinary, which is why you should have a disciplinary code. Your disciplinary code doesn't have to be a long document. I've seen some SMEs include this in their contract of employment, which is fine. However, ideally, it's better to keep things that are not contractual or benefits out of the contract of employment and keep them in a policy to allow you to easily change it if you want to change it at a future date. So it's really important to have a disciplinary code. It doesn't have to be long. You can emphasize in the code that it's a guideline. So it's not cast in stone. And really, you have to follow the principles of natural justice, which is a right to be heard and right to an independent adjudicator. So which is why reporting lines are important. The person who should hear the case should not be the person that the individual is reporting to. It should be an independent person. Fairness also, you need to establish, was there a rule broken? Was the rule known? Was the rule consistently applied? Was the procedure followed? I always hear people complaining about the courts, that the courts are not fair and they always favor the employee. My experience of the courts has not been that. My experience of the industrial relations courts in particular is that they really do want to determine whether natural justice was followed and whether employees were fairly treated. So they're checking for fairness and that you followed your own procedure. What tends to happen is, as employers, we don't follow our own procedures. And then when we go to court, we lose because we didn't follow our own procedures. So it's really important that if you do have a procedure, you follow it and that it's well understood also by colleagues. The code of conduct is also important. It defines what is acceptable and not acceptable conduct. For example, things like loan sharking, speaking to the media about the company, conduct outside of the organization. Some organizations have reputational risk, so they emphasize the conduct outside of organization. Even things like the dress code. What is the dress code for your SME, for your organization? It might be important depending on the type of SME. For example, if you have a service industry, if you're in the service or hospitality industry where you've got front-facing staff, you want people to dress professionally and properly. So you may include things like that in the code of conduct. Performance management, it's something that is spoken about a lot. I'll speak about it a little bit more later on. But in line with the disciplinary code, you need to demonstrate that the corrective process which can lead to disciplinary process, this needs to be very clearly defined in your performance management. So you can't just terminate somebody because they're not performing, for example. You need to be able to demonstrate that you followed a process to correct that person and they weren't able to be corrected. And then after that point, you then invoke the disciplinary process. That should be enshrined in your performance management system. The other one is contract expiry reports. These are important because, if you're going to be doing short-term contracts, you need to keep track of those to make sure that contracts are not expiring, and you're not aware of that. The other one that's interesting is organization structures. When you're running an SME, sometimes you don't have time to sit and do an organization structure. It takes a lot of time and you're just thinking, look, I'm just trying to survive. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. They all report to me. I think the main challenge comes when the organization begins to grow. When I went to the Harvard Business School for the LSE, the Leadership for Senior Executive program, we did a number of case studies, and quite a number of them were about small startups, which started small, but grew to be huge organizations, unicorns, huge organizations. And they didn't have the underlying HR systems and processes, including structures, reporting lines, how the teams were going to be organized. So that was something that we spent a considerable amount of time on. It may, in the early stages, it may not be something that you have the bandwidth to do, but it's something that you should consider, especially as you're planning for growth. To just understand what model is going to work for you. Is it going to be flat? Is it going to be hierarchical? Is it going to be team-based? All those things are things that you should start to, at the very least, consider as your business begins to grow. Leave management is one area which really can impact organizations. Again, it's got to do with resources. When your organization is small and people are going on leave, it's actually a pain, because you're thinking, I don't have the headcount and this person wants to go on leave. The reason it's really important for you to allow for leave management is because to manage the leave it's a huge liability. If that person leaves your organization and they haven't been on leave for the 3 years, you're looking at paying them 3 months' salary when they leave, if they resign. If a person is dismissed, if you have to downsize your organization, if you're carrying massive amounts of leave, it's a huge liability. Find ways to manage that leave. Find ways to make sure that leave is under control and managed. The last one, again, is around the basics, is overtime management. Again, this is an area where, before you know it, overtime becomes part of people's salaries. People are hanging around so that they can benefit from the overtime. The supervisors are not properly managing it. They're just approving overtime. Have very basic systems in place within whether it's a policy or whether it's your conditions of service, whether it's even in the contract, that overtime must be pre-approved by management. And then also overtime, be careful of, I've seen conditions of service where overtime is accrued daily. So at the end of every day, if I'm working 8 days, if I'm working 8 hours and I work 5 hours overtime on that one day, then I accrue 5 hours on that particular day. Another way you can approach it is, if somebody is entitled to 48 hours in a week, it's better that you do overtime on a weekly basis. If somebody accrues overtime over the 48 hours, it's at that point that overtime becomes effective. So those are some things that you just need to look at and control. Something that I didn't mention, but which is really important, is around headcount. That's another area that you find creep, especially in SMEs. You have to keep a pulse, finger on the pulse on this one, because in many organizations, headcount is the biggest cost. People are the biggest cost. So if you don't manage this, it can really impact your organization negatively. So headcount is the one area that you really need to keep aware. You need to keep abreast of and make sure it's properly managed by whoever is managing your business for you. Then I've spent quite a bit of time on this because these are the areas that can really hurt your business. So that's why I'm spending a lot of time on the basics. Lastly is labor legislation and statutory compliance. Again, people will often say very negative things about the Ministry of Labor, that they're too supportive of employees. Even as a large corporation, that's never been my experience. The Ministry of Labor, should be the place that you should feel free to engage, to ask for guidance and advice. And they're very supportive. They're very supportive because they also don't want you to do the wrong thing by your organization and by the employees. So make sure that the Ministry of Labor is a place that you can ask questions. They're more than happy to guide if you do engage with them. There are also, of course, the usual licenses and regulators that you need to be mindful of. ZRA for taxation. There's NAPSA. The penalties at NAPSA are high. So that's not an area where you want to fall behind. Make sure that you keep abreast of NAPSA payments as and when they fall due. ZACWA as well, I spoke about earlier on. All academic qualifications need to now be certified by ZACWA. Workers' Compensation Fund as well. And then there are also industry-specific licensing as well that you just need to be aware of as well.
So maybe, Chimango, just before we get into the next slide, I think important for me is, as I'm listening to you, there's aspects around contract, and I'm really not sure how many of us are actually sitting with a contract in hand. And I think for me, what is so timely is next week we're celebrating May Day, which is Labor Day. And I think it's such an opportune time for us to go back and start looking at, do I actually have all the information on the employee file? Have I put my conditions of service in place so that tomorrow, if an employee takes me to the labor office, at least I have the right documentation. So I think for me, just as almost, if I can call it a pit stop right now, and hearing everything that you said, you can easily see how imperative it is for SMEs to also start having this documentation in place. So I just thought, I think for me, I'm having a lot of aha moments, if I can call them that, where I'm actually saying, wow, I didn't actually think, you need that level of detail in as much as I'm an SME. So I just thought I should quickly interject and really just say how I think it's important for every SME to start looking at this documentation.
Absolutely. And what you'll find now is that a lot of this information is available online. But I think a lot of people don't have the time to look for this information. But these are things that can really, really hurt your business if you don't have them in place. And I've seen businesses with huge liabilities, whether it's from NAPSA, from 5-6 years ago, even this gratuity thing as well. It's I think a lot of SMEs are going to be hit quite hard with gratuity as well, and leave, things like leave. People haven't been on leave for 6 years. Even when they have been on leave, there are no records to prove that they went on leave because people don't keep records. So it's really important to make sure that you keep these records as well. Record keeping, again, is another critical one, just to make sure that you don't find yourself sitting with these massive liabilities that can really cripple your business. So I spent quite a bit of time on that because, as Vanji said, that's the main area. That's the showstopper, and that's the foundation. And in this environment that we're operating in here in Zambia, that's an area that you can't afford to not get right. I'll touch a little bit on attracting, retaining, and rewarding. This is a massive, massive topic. So I don't have, I won't be able to go into the detail that I need to go into. But what I will do is I'll just touch on, again, what seems to be very basic things, but things that we don't do. Things which and I'm guilty of that as well. I'm an employer. I have domestic staff, for example, and there's certain things that I should do, but I don't do because you rely on trust. But the world is becoming an increasingly complex place, and relying on trust is really putting your business at risk. Large organizations have the ability to attract the best talent, and it's often difficult for SMEs to compete, for that talent. However, we're lucky and unlucky, I guess, but SMEs are lucky in that they're very high levels of unemployment and a lot of educated and skilled labor. So it's an employer's market, so to speak, which is a great advantage for SMEs. And that's the reason why SMEs are so important to our economy. They create employment. They're so critical to our economy. I have a friend who is running a series of restaurants, and I was chatting with her one day, and she was telling me, I employ 100 people. That's a lot of people. And that's why SMEs are so important to us as a country. I'll just recommend some very basic but best practice things that SMEs should do, which we as large corporates do not deviate from. Sometimes the risk of running an SME is that you want to hire your friends, relatives, that nephew maybe who's got a drinking problem and is really harassing your sister and really needs a job. So it's okay, I'll find something for him to do in my company. That's the general temptation of smaller organizations. Large corporates will never do that. Especially if they've got governance processes in place. They will not do that. And they won't do that because it will affect their organization's ability to deliver, and it's a cost. It's a cost to the organization. So the recommendations I'll make is really follow a transparent and competitive recruitment process. It sounds simple, but I know it's difficult because people will be saying, why can't you hire your brother? Or why can't you hire your cousin? That they're going through a difficult time. But I strongly recommend that you follow a transparent and competitive recruitment process if you want your organization to thrive and grow. If you've got relatives who are competent and skilled, let them compete and be objective about hiring them as well. The second one is reference checks. This is something that we don't do, even with domestic workers, we don't do. So we literally allow complete strangers into our homes at our own peril to look after our children. And same applies for SMEs. When we do our reference checks, we also do things like police clearance. We make sure that we have copies of NRCs. Those are things that are really important. Find out if the person said that they worked at this and this lodge, call that lodge to confirm. We're very fortunate that our society is relatively small, so 7 degrees of separation is really easy for us to find out about somebody. And that's something that we really must do. It can really impact your organization if you don't, not just in terms of performance, but in terms of risk as well to the organization. Hire for attitude. There's nothing worse than going to a customer-facing organization, and the person at the front office is on their phone. They don't even bother to greet you. They're rude. You are not there as the owner, but that is the person that your customers are experiencing. It affects your business. So really make sure that that your staff are held to account, and that they're the right people in terms of their attitude. Pay critical staff well. Don't scrimp on them. I know, again, money is tight, but if they're people who you really, really need and who your business depends on, pay them. They'll make their money back. One thing, and I think Venus, who did the previous talk, will be happy to hear. Don't ever scrimp on an accountant or accounting services. That is the fastest way to sinking your business. If you can't afford a full-time accountant, there are people who offer outsourced accounting services, SMEs. That is the best money that you're going to spend. It's on an accountant. So really make sure that that is the single thing that you do, the single type of person that you spend money on if you're going to spend on one person. The rest really is just around, retention. These are very sort of, jargony things to do, for me to talk to, but they are important. If you want to retain your best people, try to be as competitive as you can be in your remuneration. Incentivize them. If you've got salespeople, identify sales incentives that you can apply to motivate them and make sure that they are performing. Work-life balance and culture. A lot of people say this doesn't exist. I was reading an article recently where it talks about the work-life balance cycle as opposed to a culture that it's like a wheel. But I think for me, it's more about culture as opposed to the work life in itself, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. And then upskilling and developing employees, even for SMEs. If you go to some places and the way that people act, you can tell they haven't been trained, and it's very frustrating for customers. So ensure that your employees are trained, but also that it's also motivating for people when you invest in them. So training is critical to businesses.
So maybe, Chimango, just before you get into the third topic, I think we have a comment from Linda Simeta. Linda, thank you for posting the comment. She says, this is vital information. Thanks for sharing, and hope you can share the slides with us. So I think we already have a request for the slides coming through. And maybe just to everyone who's listening in, if you've just joined us, we do see that we do have a number of people who are still just joining in. Please just post your question or your comment in the chat. And as we're getting to the Q&A, if you need to raise your hand, you can raise your hand, and then we can also be able to take questions as we go along. But I just thought we should take a comment from Linda, and her just making reference that I think the information that you're presenting is really vital for businesses as well.
Thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate that. It's daunting, and as much as I was excited to speak to customers, it was also quite daunting as well. So thank you for that motivation. The last two topics I'll be very brief, but I just thought they were important for me to just make mention. Culture is really important. When starting a business, it's the last thing you're thinking about is what are the values and what's the culture. What culture do I want? You're just trying to survive. Survival is top of mind. So, but as your business grows, it's important for you to stand back and try to see what culture you want for your business. And it's important because you can see the amount of investment large corporations put in creating a culture. So you need to be really deliberate about whether the culture you have as a small business is the culture you want to grow your business. And the sooner you define the culture you want, the better for the organization. For example, do you want a high performance culture? If you want a high performance culture, there's certain things that you'll need to put in place to ensure that everything drives that culture. For example, if you want a high performance culture, you may put in certain incentives that drive the organization in that direction. Your performance management system must be consistent with consequence management, very clear. So there's certain things that you need to start doing to make sure, you need to set goals for your team members. Do you want a people-centric culture that's caring for people? Do you want a hierarchical flat structure? I spoke about that earlier on. Do you want a customer-centric culture? What does that mean? You need to define that, and you need to live it as well, and demand that your employees live that culture. The dress code, formal versus casual. There's certain organizations, for example, where they dictate to type of shoes you should wear. And that's because they're trying to develop a certain culture, and they're trying to get a certain type of clientele, and the dress code talks to that. Do you want respect and dignity to be part of your culture? Is it a carrot or a whip? Funnily, both work, both work. Both the people-centric culture work, but also the whip culture, it's hard sort of, fear culture. They both work. However, my view is always a fear culture is not sustainable. Those are the cultures where you get a lot of, resentment breeding. People don't tell you the truth because there's no psychological safety. And you get high levels of burnout. Suddenly you have that person who's your star, just leave. So it's not my preferred culture, but if that's a culture that you want to develop in your organization, it's your organization. But you need to be deliberate about that. And also if you want equity and fairness, things like favoritism and nepotism and SMEs can be really damaging to an organization. You end up losing good people because of that. So those are things that you need to be just aware of in terms of the culture. And, the high performance culture, there's always so much talk about high performance culture. And, really creating this type of culture is about leading from the top, the tone from the top. If you look at the graph on the right, people look at, the x-axis is looking at performance, high performance as you go to the right. And then the y-axis is looking at high people centricness. If you have, organizations that are low on people and low on performance, your organization is going to die. It's a graveyard. It's not going to thrive. If you have an organization that's very high on people, where everybody loves each other and we're all caring and nurturing, but the performance requirement is low, you don't have a performance management, rigorous performance culture, it's a country club. Everybody's happy except you. You're not going to make money. But if you have high performance, where, it's similar to the fear culture that I spoke about, where you demand high performance, but you're not people-centric, you don't really care for your colleagues, you get a sweatshop. So again, it delivers, but it's not a nice place to work. I think where we're all aspiring to be or to create is organizations that are high on people and high on performance. And it's really about, first of all, defining your objectives for the organization, establishing objectives for the employees and the teams, that you have clearly defined objectives that everybody understands, improving performance amongst the teams and employees, and ensuring there's accountability. There needs to be accountability and consequence management as well, really important. What I found from businesses is they're so busy just trying to stay alive, just trying to survive. But when you ask them basic things like, what was your revenue last month? They don't know. What is your target revenue, for example, in a year, in 2 years? They can't tell you. They're just trying to pay the bills, the workers. So sometimes they tend to lose sight. So when people are talking about high performance cultures, it sounds like a fancy thing, but it's as basic as being clear about your goals, your employees being clear about their goals and holding them accountable, and ensuring that consequence management prevails. Lastly, Vanji, I'll just talk about the future of HR, which maybe requires somebody a little bit younger than me to talk to. But I think I can say one or two things based on my experience and observations of, recent developments. I think one, of course, we're all talking about is COVID changed the way that we work. I know quite a number of organizations have gone back to the office, but others have decided to hold fast to, the new ways of working. So hybrid working, remote working, as well, the flexible hours. I remember there was an organization that we were all in awe of because they had introduced flexible hours, and we were so impressed by them about maybe 10 years ago. And now most organizations are allowing for that. There's an SME that I know. I'd wanted to go visit them at their offices, and they said, "Oh no, we can't really visit because we're not in the office. We hotspot because it's a tech company. They work mostly from remotely, so they can work from anywhere." So for SMEs who can, this can be a huge benefit, because it may mean you don't need office space, for example, which is extremely expensive here in Lusaka. So it may mean you need a small office space, or you maybe don't need an office space at all. Other things as well is outsourcing. Outsourcing has been there for a long time. As SMEs take advantage of outsourcing options, it will save you from, one, having huge headcounts, and two, having to manage, because managing is as difficult as managing people can be as difficult as managing costs. The other things, of course, are virtual assistants. In those days, we used to have to pay huge amounts for people to come up with our brochures, to manage our social media. Now you can get virtual assistants, people who are available to do these services for you on a one-off sort of basis, for minimum, a fraction of what we used to pay before for a lot of these things. And the virtual assistants cover all sorts of areas, including accounting, and of course AI and apps. There are a lot of apps that we can now use to manage a lot of processes within an organization, even things like shift planning for hotels. There are apps that you can download and use really at a minimum amount. So there are a lot of new ways of working that we can leverage on as SMEs, and maybe I'm not sure if digital will be speaking. I don't know if Owen will be having a session, but I would look forward to listening to Owen's session, because I know that he'll be able to share with us so many ways that we can leverage on technology in order to make our business thrive.
So thank you so much, Chimango. I think for me, the last 15 minutes have really flown by. A lot to learn, so much to learn. But maybe before I get into just a recap of some of the areas that you've touched on, we do have a comment from Tisa that says, really insightful, especially in creating a high-performing organization. Thank you so much for the nuggets. So that's a comment from Tisa. So Tisa, thank you so much for that. And maybe just, we're still getting people jumping on. And I think, like you said at the beginning, we need to make sure that you come back. We need to make sure that you come back, because I think there's a lot that you've touched on. So when you look at the fear culture, I think predominantly in a Zambian setting, maybe even as far back as growing up, the whip effect has always worked. So sometimes you find yourself actually taking it into the place of work and assuming that will work. But again, maybe that's not the model, So again, we really just have to see how our SMEs can strike a balance in terms of what culture are we building. Again, it's really important to note that no matter how small the organization is, you can build the culture that you want. And this is a culture that will also help to ensure that you have a high-performing team. I think for me, some of the aspects that I got was just being objective in the hiring process. We don't do that often, so I'll get my sister, because then I know it's cheaper to pay her. But will I actually yield the results that I'm looking for? The reference checks as well. How many times are we actually going back to check the person that we've employed, just to make sure that they're credible and they can really hold against what they said they could do? And the hire for attitude. I think service has become so critical, regardless of the sector that you're in. The person that you see first for the business really does represent and will impact whether I'll come back as a client or not. So again, maybe this is a question for our clients online. How many times are we actually going back to train our frontline? Are we actually having those conversations to say, when a customer comes in, remember to smile. It's the basics. Remember to greet, remember to smile. Don't use your phone. I think now we're in a world of social media where you constantly feel that you have to have your phone. So I think it's important. And when you come to the future of HR, it's interesting to see that AI is actually coming into that space. And when you go into platforms like LinkedIn, sometimes there are postings around a remote office assistant.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, how will that work? Because sometimes you actually think that, I physically have to be there for you to employ me. So you can really see that the world is changing. And to your point, yes, we will have a session with the technology team that we're also looking forward to. But maybe I'll also just take a comment from Milumbe. She says, loving the element of employing for the right reasons as an SME, not out of emotion. So thank you for that. We've also posted in the chat our email address, womeninbusiness@absa.africa. So please, I know there was a request earlier for the presentation to be shared. We just kindly request that those of us who want the presentation, please just drop us an email and we'll be able to send it directly to you. So at this point, we'll get into our Q&A session. If you have a question for Chimango, kindly raise your hand. If you feel comfortable, you can turn on your camera or you can post in the chat and we'll be able to take questions. Lucy says, very insightful tips coming from this session. So I think, Chimango, we're really getting quite a lot of positive feedback and the need for us to see how we can have another session around the HR piece. I think this is one where many a time we overlook it and just think, this is for big companies. This is not for me, as a small enterprise or as a medium enterprise. But it's clear to see that for us to be able to get ahead and grow to the level that we want, HR has to be at the core of what we're doing. Elia, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. It says, thank you so much, Absa team. I love being part of the Absa Women in Business as a woman in business. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elia,
for that compliment. So I don't know, Chimango, maybe as we're waiting for questions to come through, from your experience as a human capital expert, what advice would you give enterprises for them to become high performing? I know you've touched on a few aspects, but what advice would you give and say, this will really set you home?
I think it's really around to do with being very clear about where your business is going. And, it's easier said than done because a lot of the times, you're really just trying to survive. You're really just trying to survive. And, you've got your employees, you've got ZRA, you've got NAPSA. You can't look beyond that. But it's so important for you to define where you're going, whether it's revenue-wise, whether it's market share, whether it's profits. Set yourself a target. I'd start from there. Set yourself a target and start from there. And once you set that target, you need to cascade it to your team so that your team knows where they're going and what their contribution to that goal is. And again, it sounds, fancy, but I've known organizations where every morning they have, for example, what they call like a prayer meeting. And every morning they say, okay, how did we do yesterday? What do we need to do today? And they have, just 5-10 minute stand-up meetings every day, every morning, so that they're all aligned. It could be weekly, it could be monthly. And from there, you hold people accountable. It's something that large corporates do. It's something that SMEs can also do. It's not complicated. And holding people accountable. And really, for me, it's about the people. It's about having the best people. You're not going to have a football team where they bring in, the coach's, a brother, a Division I football team where they bring in the coach's brother because he needs a job and, he can't get a job anywhere else. They get the best. You need to treat your organization like a Division I football team. That's how you need to treat. You need to really make sure you've got the best talent. Because without the best people that you can find, that you can afford, your business will struggle. It will struggle. to become high performing. I think that's how you need to think about it.
Okay, thank you for that, Chimango. So maybe I'll just go back into the comments. Helen, I do see your comment. Helen just joined because she was failing to join. We do apologize that you were not able to join much earlier, and she's asking whether there's a recording. Oliver as well just joined and is requesting for the recording. Wupe, I saw you just join in as well, and we're just at the tail end of today's presentation. I also just see that we have Daisy joining in now. So you can see that I think we have quite a number of people who are joining at the tail end. But in the chat, for those of us who have just joined, we have posted our email address, which is womeninbusiness, one word, at absa.africa. Please just drop us an email and we'll be able to share the presentation with you. There is a comment from Chama. Chama did say, very, very insightful and awesome session. Thank you so much. Thank you for that, Chama. Comment from Linda that says, very insightful session, Chimango. Really appreciate hearing how to run your business from an HR end. We learn a lot about business management, marketing, and advertising, but rarely, if not never, HR practices. So thank you so much for that. I think the comments on the session being very insightful keep coming. And the request, again, we have posted our email address, which is womeninbusiness@absa.africa. So please just drop us an email and then we'll be able to share the presentation and also ensure that you have access to the recording. So I think this brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you so much, Chimango, for coming on board. We are grateful for the time, knowing how busy the HR world is. But for you to just take time to speak to us, speak to the clients, our women in business is really, really important for us, because I think, as we always say, within Absa, every story matters. And to hear that HR piece, I think for me, just makes it worth the while. So as we close, maybe we would just like to get your final words.
I'm never too busy for the client, Vanshi. That's why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was a real privilege being here to talk to our clients, our women in business. We really commend you. Like I said, like I earlier said as well, our values are on courage and resourcefulness. We really admire you for living those values, and we really wish success for your organizations. We really wish you to thrive, and we'll do everything that we can as Absa Zambia to make sure that you're supported and that we provide you with the support that you need.
Okay, thank you so much, Chimango. Maybe just the last comment, I think, which hones what you've just said. You're never too busy. Sylvester says, as someone in HR, this session came as a reminder for me to ensure I'm always compliant and have everything in place. Thank you so much. And I think on behalf of all of us, I just really like to say thank you for today. Thank you for taking time. Thank you for reminding us how important HR is in our day-to-day running of the business. Ladies, please, let's have those contracts in place. Let's make sure that we are going back to our frontline staff, reminding them that they need to have the right attitude. And Chimango's always here to support us. She's never too busy for the client.
No.
So we'll always just try to see how we can bring her back in for another session, maybe on wellness. Just that work-life balance. I think it's a lot. It's one that we need to come back on. So we would be grateful if you would be able to accord us the time. Oh, and there's a comment that says, by the way, men are here also.
Well, thank you. You're also our clients. You're also our clients. I was going to actually correct Banjo on that. I was going to say I can see our men as well on the call. We appreciate you, and we're always going to support you.
Thank you so much. And to everyone, have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.